For most of history, people judge a gemstone the same way you're probably judging the one in your hand right now, by what they could see in that moment. A dull surface, a muddy color, a stone that looked tired, lifeless, forgotten. But here's the part almost nobody realizes. Some of the most valuable gemstones on Earth hide everything, until someone cleans them the right way. Today, we're counting down 10 stones that looked worthless at first glance. Stones people stepped over, donated, or even threw away, until one simple cleaning revealed something completely different. And the stone ranked number 1 on this list? It was once mistaken for nothing more than a dirty pebble, until a single brush stroke changed its entire destiny. Ranked 10th, mud-covered Chalcedony, the stone no one ever looked at twice. At first glance, this stone doesn't invite attention. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't catch light. It doesn't even look finished. Mud-covered Chalcedony is the kind of stone people step around without thinking. In creek beds and riverbanks, it blends perfectly into its surroundings. Dull gray, brown, sometimes almost chalky. Its surface feels waxy, lifeless, and opaque. Nothing about it suggests value. Nothing about it asks to be picked up. And that is exactly why it was ignored for centuries. Chalcedony often forms in environments where fine sediment slowly coats its surface. Over time, layers of clay, iron residue, and organic material seal the stone inside a skin that hides everything underneath. To the untrained eye, it looks unfinished, or worse, worthless. Many early collectors dismissed it as common riverstone. Some used it as landscaping fill. Others tossed it back into the water without a second thought. Before cleaning, there is no visible reward, no transparency, no color play, no structure to suggest anything special. But chalcedony does not reveal itself quickly. When the outer layer is finally removed, not cut, not polished, simply cleaned, the transformation is quiet but unmistakable. Beneath the mud, the stone begins to transmit light. Soft translucency emerges. Internal banding appears. Subtle color zones reveal themselves in milky whites, smoky grays, pale blues, and warm earth tones. What looked dead was never dead at all. It was only concealed. This moment is where chalcedony earns its place on this list. Its value does not come from rarity alone. Chalcedony is found in many regions. What gives it worth is what the dirt prevented people from seeing. Uniform structure, exceptional durability, and optical depth that only becomes visible once the surface is cleared. Historically, this is why clean chalcedony became one of the most trusted materials for seals, tools, and carvings across ancient civilizations. The stone didn't change. Human perception did. Collectors today understand something earlier generations missed. Chalcedony's beauty is subtle by design. It rewards patience, not excitement. Its surface does not advertise what lies beneath. Instead, it waits for someone willing to slow down and remove what time has placed on top of it. That is why mud-covered chalcedony represents the purest form of this theme. It doesn't need cutting to be recognized. It doesn't need enhancement to matter. It only needs to be seen clearly. In a world trained to chase brilliance and immediate impact, chalcedony teaches a different lesson, that some value reveals itself only after assumptions are washed away. And in countless creeks, even now, stones like this are still being ignored, simply because no one thought they were worth cleaning. Ranked 9th, iron-stained quartz. When dirt rewrote the truth. Iron-stained quartz rarely looks like something worth stopping for. Its surface is usually rough, clouded by rust-colored streaks that cling to every fracture and edge. Reds, browns, and dull oranges bleed across the stone, disguising its clarity and flattening its shape. In creeks and riverbeds, it blends seamlessly with iron-rich gravel, heavy, opaque, and unremarkable. To most eyes, it looks damaged. To many collectors, it looks ruined. Iron staining forms slowly. As groundwater moves through mineral-rich soil, dissolved iron oxides settle onto quartz surfaces, bonding to microscopic cracks and pores. Over time, this coating becomes thick enough to obscure everything beneath it. What remains visible is not the quartz itself, but a mask, one that convinces nearly everyone that the stone has nothing to offer. Before cleaning, iron-stained quartz gives no reward, no sparkle, no transparency, No hint of structure. For generations, these stones were dismissed as low-grade material or ignored entirely. Some were broken apart for construction fill. Others were left behind in creek beds where clearer stones were preferred. Even experienced eyes learned to walk past them, trained by habit to associate rust with damage and dullness with low value. And yet, iron staining does not destroy quartz, it hides it. When the iron layer is finally removed, gently, patiently, without cutting, the illusion collapses. The quartz underneath often reveals surprising clarity. Internal growth patterns appear. Phantom crystals emerge, suspended like frozen shadows inside the stone. In some cases, delicate inclusions and zoning become visible, transforming what looked like waste into a geological record of formation over millions of years. The stone didn't improve. The surface simply stopped lying. This is the moment that defines iron-stained quartz and earns it a place on this list. Its worth is not obvious because the most visible part of it is not the stone itself. Value only becomes apparent when the iron is stripped away and the quartz is allowed to speak for itself. Historically, this is why clean quartz became prized for both scientific study and craftsmanship. Once cleared, its durability, optical behavior, and internal features made it valuable not just as a gemstone, but as a window into geological time. What once appeared flawed was revealed to be intact, even exceptional. Iron-stained quartz challenges a common assumption that what looks degraded must be inferior. In reality, the staining often protected the stone, preserving clarity beneath layers of mineral residue that fooled nearly everyone. That is the quiet power of this gemstone. It doesn't announce its worth, it tolerates being misunderstood, and it waits patiently for someone willing to remove the dirt instead of judging the surface. Even now, countless iron-stained quartz stones remain exactly where they were found, dismissed for the same reason they always were. Not because they lack value, but because their value is hidden under a story written by rust. Ranked 8th, Waterworn Hessonite Garnet, the stone that looked too tired to matter. Among creek stones, water-worn Hessonite garnet is easy to overlook. It arrives rounded, darkened, and subdued. Its edges softened by years of tumbling, its surface dulled by constant friction. The vibrant reds people associate with garnet are absent. What remains is a muted brown or cinnamon tone that absorbs light instead of reflecting it. To an untrained eye, it looks exhausted, like a stone that has already given up whatever beauty it once had. Hessonite garnet often travels long distances before it is found. As it moves through river systems, water abrasion strips away sharp crystal faces and polishes the surface unevenly. Sediment fills tiny surface pits. Iron-rich deposits stain the exterior. By the time it rests in a creek bed, its most recognizable features have been erased. Before cleaning, there is nothing dramatic to see. No sparkle, no fire, no crisp geometry. For generations, stones like this were mistaken for common pebbles or dismissed as low-grade garnet, unworthy of attention. Prospectors learned to search for sharper crystals and brighter colors. Anything rounded and dull was assumed to be inferior, a leftover fragment of something better already lost upstream. That assumption proved costly. Once cleaned, water-worn Hessonite begins to change. Not suddenly, but unmistakably. The muddy residue lifts. Iron staining fades. Subtle translucency appears beneath the surface. When light passes through the stone, a warm internal glow emerges, revealing honeyed oranges, deep ambers, and flashes of internal fire that were completely invisible before. The stone did not become more valuable, it became visible. Hessonite's worth lies in its internal character, not its surface condition. Its refractive properties and rich color zoning survive even extreme erosion. What water removed was not value but distraction, replacing sharp beauty with quiet endurance. Cleaning simply reverses the illusion that wear equals loss. Historically, this misunderstanding caused Hessonite to be undervalued compared to other garnets. Smooth, worn specimens were ignored in favor of fresher-looking stones, even though their internal quality remained intact. Only after cleaning did collectors realize that water-worn examples often held the same optical richness, sometimes even better preserved, than stones that looked more impressive at first glance. This is why hessonite earns its place on this list. Its value is not immediate, its beauty does not announce itself, and its surface actively misleads anyone judging too quickly. Water-worn hessonite garnet stands as a reminder that time does not always destroy worth. Sometimes it disguises it so completely that only patience can undo the mistake. Even now, countless rounded garnets remain in creek beds, passed over because they look tired, dulled by water, and too ordinary to matter. In reality, they are not worn out at all. They are simply waiting for someone to clean away the evidence of survival. Ranked 7th, clay-filled tourmaline. The crystal everyone thought was industrial waste. Few gemstones are dismissed as quickly as clay-filled tourmaline, especially schorl. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a dirty black fragment, dull, opaque, and lifeless. Its surface is often packed with dried clay, wedged tightly into deep grooves that run lengthwise along the crystal. In creek beds and weathered deposits, it resembles broken machinery slag or construction debris rather than anything geological. Most people never hesitate. They step past it. Schorl is the most common form of tourmaline, and its reputation works against it. The crystal structure is naturally dark, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. When clay fills the vertical striations, a signature feature of tourmaline, those defining lines disappear. What remains is a rough, black object with no sparkle, no color, and no obvious reason to care. Before cleaning, there is no visual payoff, no translucency, no polish, no hint that the stone belongs in a collection. Historically, this is why clay-filled schorl was ignored for so long. Early collectors favored colorful tourmalines and sharply defined crystals. Anything black and clogged with sediment was assumed to be low-grade or non-gem material. Some specimens were discarded entirely. Others were misclassified as industrial minerals, useful only for weight or hardness, not beauty or value. But schorl hides its identity better than almost any gemstone on this list. When the clay is finally removed, patiently, carefully, without cutting, the transformation is striking. The stone's true form emerges. Long parallel striations become visible. Crystal faces sharpen. Subtle natural luster appears along the ridges. In certain lighting, faint internal reflections reveal that the stone is not dead black, but structurally complex and deeply ordered. Nothing new was added. Everything important was already there. Cleaning restores what clay concealed: crystal integrity, growth patterns, and unmistakable tourmaline geometry. What once looked like a formless chunk suddenly reads as a complete mineral specimen. For collectors, this recognition moment matters more than color. Schorl's value lies in its structure, durability, and role in understanding tourmaline formation, not in visual flash. This misunderstanding persisted for generations. Even experienced eyes learned to associate black, dirt-filled crystals with worthlessness. It took time and careful cleaning for that assumption to unravel. Clay-filled schorl earns its place on this list because it represents one of the clearest examples of value erased by contamination, not by nature. The clay did not damage the crystal, it only disguised it well enough to fool almost everyone. Today, clean schorl is respected for what it is: a complete, resilient crystal that survived pressure, erosion, and neglect. Its worth is quiet, structural, and deeply geological, invisible to anyone unwilling to remove the dirt first. Even now, black tourmaline fragments remain scattered in creeks and fields, ignored for the same reason they always were. They look too ordinary, too dark, too dirty, and until someone takes the time to clean them, they will continue to be mistaken for something they never were. Ranked 6th, alluvial zircon, the stone everyone learned to avoid. Alluvial zircon is rarely picked up on purpose. In riverbeds and creek deposits, it appears as small, rounded grains or worn pebbles, coated in sediment and stained a dull brown. It lacks sharp edges, lacks color, and lacks anything that signals importance. To most people, it looks like heavy sand, the kind of material brushed aside without a second glance. For generations, that reaction was intentional. Zircon earned an unfortunate reputation early on. Its natural brown tones, combined with surface wear from long transport in water, caused it to be mistaken for low-value material or dismissed as an impurity. Prospectors trained themselves to ignore it, focusing instead on stones with cleaner colors and more dramatic forms. In many places, brown zircon was actively avoided, seen as a distraction rather than a discovery. Before cleaning, there is no reason to doubt that judgment. The surface is dead. The shape is unimpressive. The color suggests nothing rare or refined. But zircon is one of the most deceptive gemstones in nature. When alluvial zircon is finally cleaned, gently removing clay films, iron staining, and sediment packed into microscopic surface pits, a very different story begins to emerge. The stone's luster returns. Light interacts with the crystal in unexpected ways. Under proper illumination, high dispersion becomes visible, breaking light into sharp flashes that were completely absent before. The change feels almost unfair. Zircon did not gain brilliance through cleaning. It always had it. The rounded shape and muddy coating simply prevented light from entering and exiting the crystal correctly. Once that barrier is removed, zircon's true optical power reveals itself, a level of fire that rivals far more celebrated gemstones. This realization came late. For much of history, zircon was undervalued precisely because it traveled well. Its durability allowed it to survive long journeys through water, but that same endurance erased the features people relied on to judge worth. By the time it reached a creek bed, it no longer looked like the stone it was. Cleaning restored what erosion concealed. Collectors eventually learned that brown alluvial zircon often held exceptional internal quality. Its rounded form was not a flaw, but evidence of survival. Its dull surface was not decay, but a mass created by time and transport. Once cleaned, these stones revealed sharp optical behavior and crystal integrity that had been invisible for centuries. Alluvial zircon earns its place on this list because it represents a learned blindness, a gemstone people were taught to ignore. Its worth was hidden not just by dirt, but by habit. Even now, countless brown zircon grains remain exactly where water left them, dismissed as nothing more than heavy sand. Not because they lack value, but because they learned too well how to blend in. Ranked fifth, cloudy aquamarine, the blue that refused to appear. Cloudy aquamarine is rarely recognized at first glance. When found in riverbeds, it arrives softened by water. Its surface is dulled and its color muted almost to invisibility. The pale blues people associate with aquamarine are absent. What remains is a cloudy scratched stone that looks closer to milky glass than a gemstone. Most people never suspect beryl. Aquamarine crystals often travel far from their source. As they tumble through rivers, sharp faces are worn away and microscopic fractures develop on the surface. Sediment lodges itself into these tiny imperfections, scattering light before it can pass through the stone. The result is a gemstone that appears washed out, opaque, and unremarkable, a shadow of what it truly is. Before cleaning, there is no promise, no clarity, no recognizable color, no visual reward. Historically, river-tumbled aquamarine was passed over for this reason. Prospectors and collectors learned to search for crisp, transparent crystals in situ. Anything rounded, cloudy, or pale was assumed to be inferior beryl or dismissed entirely. The stone's defining trait, its serene blue, seemed to have vanished. But the color was never gone. It was scattered. When cleaning finally removes the river residue, the fine silt, iron films, and mineral haze, the change is subtle but decisive. Light begins to travel through the crystal instead of bouncing off it. Internal clarity improves. Soft blue tones emerge, sometimes faint, sometimes surprisingly rich, revealing that the stone's identity had only been obscured, not erased. Aquamarine does not announce itself with brilliance. Its value lies in restraint. Once cleaned, its internal structure becomes readable again, allowing its color to express itself properly. What looked like lifeless opacity transforms into calm translucence, the quality that made aquamarine prized in the first place. The stone did not become purer, it became legible. This misunderstanding shaped how aquamarine was valued for generations. River-worn specimens were judged by their surface condition instead of their internal potential. Only after cleaning did collectors realize that many cloudy stones were not flawed. They were simply masked by the journey they survived. Cloudy aquamarine earns its place on this list because it demonstrates how easily value can disappear when light is disrupted. Its worth depends not on perfection, but on the ability to be seen clearly. Once the surface interference is removed, the stone speaks in the quiet language it was always meant to use. Even now, pale beryl fragments rest unnoticed in riverbeds, mistaken for nothing more than worn glass. Not because they lack beauty, but because the river learned how to hide it. Ranked fourth, colorless topaz, mud-coated, the stone no one believed was there. Colorless topaz almost never announces itself. When found in creeks or alluvial deposits, it appears as a muddy, translucent fragment with no defining color and no visual drama. Its surfaces are usually dulled by abrasion, its edges softened by transport, and its interior clouded by residue. To most people, it looks exactly like what they expect it to be, an ordinary piece of quartz. And that assumption ends the story before it ever begins. Topaz and quartz share enough visual similarities that, without clarity, they are easily confused. When mud coats the surface of colorless topaz, it erases the few clues that might distinguish it. Sharp internal reflections, crisp cleavage behavior, and the subtle way light refracts inside the crystal. What remains is a stone that offers no resistance to being dismissed. Before cleaning, there is nothing to suggest rarity. No color, no sparkle, no feature that demands attention. For generations, mud-coated topaz was ignored for this reason. Collectors trained their eyes to chase color, not structure. Stones without hue were assumed to be common and unimportant. Many colorless topaz specimens were left behind or misidentified, their true nature hidden by nothing more than the surface contamination. But topaz does not need color to matter. When the mud is finally removed, gently clearing away silt and mineral films, the stone begins to behave differently under light. Its transparency improves, internal reflections sharpen. Edges appear cleaner, more deliberate. What once looked like glass starts to feel precise, controlled, and unmistakably crystalline. The recognition is quiet but definitive. Cleaning does not create value here. It reveals identity. Once clean, the stone no longer reads as quartz. Its density, internal clarity, and optical response tell a different story, one that only becomes legible when the surface interference is gone. Historically, this is why colorless topaz was so often misclassified. Without cleaning, it offered no immediate reward. Only patience exposed the subtle distinctions that separate it from more common materials. And once recognized, its durability and optical qualities placed it firmly within the gemstone world. Colorless topaz earns its place on this list because it represents a failure of expectation. People looked for color and missed structure. They judged worth by hue alone and overlooked a gemstone that had nothing to prove visually. Even now, mud-coated topaz lies unnoticed in creek beds, mistaken for quartz by those who never think to clean what they assume they already understand. Not because it lacks value, but because its value refuses to shout. Ranked third, Opaque Creek Sapphire, the stone that refused to look like a gem. Opaque Creek Sapphire almost never looks like what people expect a sapphire to be. In shallow streams and gravel beds, it appears as a dull, heavy pebble, blue-gray, greenish, or sometimes nearly colorless. Its surface is worn smooth by water, coated in fine sediment, and completely lacking the transparency associated with precious stones. Nothing about it suggests rarity. Nothing about it invites curiosity. To most eyes, it looks like nothing more than a stubborn piece of creek gravel. Sapphires found in alluvial environments often endure long journeys. Water abrasion erases crystal faces. Clay and iron residue fill microscopic fractures. The stone's natural density causes it to settle among ordinary pebbles, where it remains unnoticed. Without clarity or shine, its defining characteristics are effectively erased. Before cleaning, recognition is almost impossible. No sparkle, no depth, no hint of corundum. Historically, this is why opaque sapphires were ignored or discarded. Prospectors trained themselves to look for transparency and color saturation. Anything opaque was assumed to be low-grade or non-gem material. Many creek sapphires were walked past repeatedly, their weight and hardness dismissed as meaningless without visible beauty. But sapphire does not lose its identity simply because it becomes opaque. When the surface residue is finally removed, washing away clay films and mineral staining, subtle but critical changes begin to appear. The stone's true density becomes apparent. Its surface takes on a different feel under light. Faint internal color zones may emerge. In some cases, the stone reveals its corundum structure through luster and resistance that no ordinary pebble possesses. The transformation is not dramatic, it is decisive. Cleaning does not turn an opaque sapphire transparent. What it does is remove the disguise that prevents recognition. Once clean, the stone behaves differently than everything around it. It holds weight. It resists abrasion. It carries a quiet presence that signals something deeper beneath the surface. This moment of recognition defined the discovery of many sapphire deposits. Entire fields of corundum-bearing gravel were ignored until clean stones began to reveal their true nature. What once looked like worthless creek debris became one of the most important gemstone resources in American history. Opaque creek sapphire earns its place on this list because its value was hidden not by rarity, but by expectation. People knew what sapphires were supposed to look like, and these stones refused to cooperate. Even now, opaque sapphires remain scattered in creeks, overlooked for the same reason they always were. They don't sparkle, they don't shine, and until someone cleans away the assumptions, not just the dirt, they remain indistinguishable from the stones around them. Ranked second, Spinel. The gemstone history got wrong. Spinel has spent most of its existence being mistaken for something else. When found in alluvial deposits, masked by iron staining and packed with clay, it appears dark, dull, and uncooperative. Its surface absorbs light. Its color, often deep red, blue, or blackened by residue, is flattened into something lifeless. In this state, it looks more like damaged corundum or industrial mineral waste than a gemstone with its own identity. For centuries, that misjudgment defined its fate. Spinel commonly forms alongside sapphire and ruby, but its physical differences are subtle, especially when coated in iron oxides and sediment. In creek environments, these coatings settle deeply into surface imperfections, erasing crystal faces and blurring optical cues. What remains is a stone that refuses to declare what it is. Before cleaning, Spinel offers no clarity, no brilliance, no distinction. Historically, this is why Spinel was misclassified on a massive scale. Many of the most famous rubies in history were later proven to be Spinel, not because Spinel lacked value, but because it was never properly recognized. In its masked state, it did not fit existing categories, so it was forced into the wrong ones. Cleaning changes that. When iron and clay are finally removed, Spinel begins to assert itself. Its surface takes on a crisp luster, edges appear sharper. Light interacts with the stone differently, revealing a balanced, even response that separates it from corundum. Subtle internal clarity and consistent color zones emerge, allowing the stone's true identity to be read for the first time. Nothing was added, nothing was enhanced. The confusion simply ended. This recognition matters because Spinel's value lies in its purity and stability. Unlike many gemstones, Spinel maintains consistent color under different lighting conditions. Its hardness and durability rival more famous stones, yet for centuries it was undervalued simply because it didn't look the part when dirty. Spinel earns its place near the top of this list because its worth was hidden twice, first by nature, then by assumption. Iron and clay concealed its features, and human bias completed the mistake. Only after cleaning did Spinel stop being compared and start being understood. Even today, masked Spinel remains overlooked in alluvial deposits, dismissed as something it is not. Its value does not depend on recognition from others, but recognition is the only way anyone ever notices it. And for most of history, that recognition never came. In first place, uncut Montana sapphire, creek gravel form, the fortune everyone learned to ignore. At first glance, this stone offers nothing. It does not sparkle. It does not shine. It does not even suggest that it belongs in a conversation about gemstones. Uncut Montana sapphire found in creek gravel form looks exactly like what it is mistaken for every day. An ordinary river pebble. Small, smooth, and worn by water, it blends perfectly into the creek bed. Its colors are muted to the point of invisibility. Blues appear gray. Greens sink into brown. Some stones look almost colorless, stripped of anything that might attract attention. This is not a failure of nature. It is a success of camouflage. Montana sapphires often travel far from where they formed. Over thousands of years, rivers break them free from their source and carry them downstream, grinding away sharp crystal faces and burying them among gravel. By the time they surface, everything people expect a sapphire to look like has been erased. What remains is familiarity, and familiarity is the fastest way to be dismissed. Before cleaning, there is no reward, no brilliance, no transparency, no reason to stop walking. This is why these stones were ignored for so long. Early prospectors were not searching for gemstones. They were searching for gold. Heavy blue-gray pebbles were shoveled aside without hesitation. Even after sapphires were known to exist in Montana, creek-worn examples continued to be overlooked. They were too small, too dull, too ordinary to challenge anyone's assumptions. And that confidence was the real mistake. When a Montana sapphire is finally cleaned, nothing dramatic happens. There is no sudden sparkle, no theatrical transformation. Instead, something quieter occurs. The surface residue disappears. Light begins to behave differently. Color clarifies. Weight becomes noticeable. What once absorbed attention now resists being ignored. The stone does not improve. The illusion simply fails. Cleaning reveals what erosion concealed. Genuine American sapphire, formed over millions of years and dismissed for decades because it refused to look important on the surface. Many of the most valuable Montana sapphires ever documented began their lives exactly this way, stepped over, ignored, and written off as creek gravel. This is what places Montana sapphire at the top of this list. Its value was not hidden underground. It was hidden in plain sight, protected not by rarity, but by assumption. Even today, sapphire-bearing gravel still moves through Montana creeks. Stones like this continue to be passed over, not because they are rare, but because they ask nothing from the eye. And that is what makes them dangerous to ignore. Not because they look valuable, but because they never needed to. Most people never take the time to clean the stones they find, and that's why history is full of mistakes. Stones that were thrown away long before anyone realized what they truly were. If you learned something new today, leave a comment saying, "I like this video." It helps this channel grow and brings you more stories hidden inside the world of gemstones.